to talk about my second quarter reading plans. But two things before I do that. First of all, one of the things that I pride myself on here at Red Fury Books is that I get to your comments in a pretty quick manner. I like to reply to just about all of the comments that I get a chance to, and I usually do that within about a day or so of video. However, this video, the comments are going to be a little delayed. I am releasing this video on my birthday weekend, so because of that, I'm probably not going to be in front of the computer very often, so it's going to take me a couple days. So if you're someone who's usually gets that response from me pretty quickly, just realize it may not be till like Tuesday or Wednesday that I get to those. But please still comment on this video. I love talking about the books that I'll be talking about, and since this is going to be what I'm going to be reading the next few months, I definitely want to hear your input on some of these books. Second thing is I received an email just this morning from a viewer that said, hey, I was looking for your Patreon and I couldn't find your Patreon. I don't have a Patreon. I've never had a Patreon. I don't have plans to have a Patreon. It's just not something that I wanted to pursue. But if for any reason you ever wanted to support the channel beyond just simply watching these videos and dropping a comment here and there, I do include my Amazon wish list in my description of all of my videos, so that is below. If you ever wanted to support the channel beyond just watching the videos, send me a book. I find that a little bit more meaningful than just getting a direct deposit every month from Patreon anyway. Never feel obligated to do so, but that is there if any of you do want to send me something. I do try my best to prioritize those books in future TBRs as well, so there is a chance if you did send me a book, I'd probably get to it definitely later this year. But let's go ahead and talk about the books that I'm going to read the second quarter of the year. Now, these TBR videos, these reading plan videos, they're not 100% concrete. I lay out 20 books that I think I'll read in the next quarter. As an example, first quarter of the year, I laid out 20 books. I did read 23 books in the first quarter of the year, and 17 of them were on that video, so it was pretty accurate. But I'm going to lay out 10 books that I'm pretty much definitely sure that I'll be reading, and then 5 books that I probably think that I'll read, and then 5 more that are just kind of maybes at this point. So let's talk about the 10 definites, and we're going to start with the first book that I'll be reading in April, and that is To Green Angel Tower Storm by Tad Williams. Editor Josh here. So my B-roll has part of my tripod in the shot. My apologies, but I don't feel like reshooting the B-roll, so we'll just have to deal with it. This is either the fourth book in Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, or the last half of the third book of Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. Whatever it is, it's the end of Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. And I was a little bit disappointed with the second book, but the first half of the third book, or whatever you want to call To Green Angel Tower Siege, I really enjoyed it. I felt myself invested in the story. I still don't love what all the character stories are doing. Sometimes they kind of sap the narrative, but the main story I'm really enjoying at this point, and just looking forward to seeing where Williams takes the end of this series. So that'll be my first read. Of course, that is a read-along that we've been doing on the channel and on the Fireside Discord, and I'll have a discussion on the channel about To Green Angel Tower, as well as the entirety of Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn when I finish this book. So look for that video probably early in May, and that'll be a live stream with Matt and Kathy and Nico again. So look for that on the schedule pretty soon. Next 3 books that will be in the definite category are the 3 books by Christopher Ruocchio, the next things that I'm reading in the Sun Eater universe. I started reading Sun Eater at the end of last year, and I've been reading something every month. That might be a novel, it might be a novella, or it might be a series of short stories. I've enjoyed the novels the most, so I'm excited that 2 of these 3 in the next quarter are novels in the series. In April, I'll be reading Tales of the Sun Eater Volume 2, which I have the Anderida Books kind of omnibus that has one of the novellas as well, but that will be my read in April, and then in May, I'll be reading the 4th book, Kingdoms of Death, and then in June, I'll be reading the 5th book, Ashes of Man. I've really been enjoying this series. I don't think at this point it's going to take over my top spot of sci-fi, but it's probably a top 5 or top 10 at this point. So we'll see how that grows over the next few months as I continue further into this series, but I'm really enjoying my time with Christopher Ruocchio's Sun Eater series. So the next 3 books I can talk about together because it is a trilogy, and in fact I have an omnibus edition of this, and it's The Fiona of Our Tapestry by Guy Gavriel Kay. And the 3 books in the series are The Summer Tree, The Wandering Fire, and The Darkest Road. And these three books, which you can see from this omnibus edition, are actually shorter than the last half of Green Angel Tower by Tad Williams. So this will probably be a quicker read. I probably won't spread it out too much. I don't know if I'll read them in succession or insert some books in between. But I am looking forward to reading Kay's first books. These are not in the style that Kay would adopt later as kind of his signature formula, which is mostly standalones and kind of an historical setting for his novels. But this is a trilogy, and it's a portal fantasy. And admittedly, a lot of people don't think that this is some of Kay's best work, but I still want to read it. I've loved this author. He's 11 for 11 for me. He is one of my absolute favorite authors of all time. So I look forward to reading all of the Fiona of Our Tapestry in the second quarter of 2025. So the last three books on the definite category, I can't shoot any B-roll because these are three new releases. So if you were to ask me today, who's on my Mount Rushmore of favorite authors, my top 4 favorite authors, I would say, in no particular order, Stephen King, Robin Hobb, Guy Gavriel Kay, and Michael Connelly. Well, 3 of those 4 authors are releasing books in May within 7 days of one another. So you can say that that's going to be an incredible little stretch for me, reading brand new works from some of my absolute favorite authors. If Hobb would have put out a book in May, I think my head would have exploded. Hobb did give a review of Kay's book already where she raved about it, so I do look forward to that. But anyway, the first of these releases is Nightshade by Michael Connelly, which comes out May 20th. Connelly is my go-to favorite crime author because he is just a master of just being consistent. Every single one of his books are really great. He just can't write a bad book. And this is a new setting for him, which is interesting to me. He has different kind of sub-series within his books, but they all kind of take place in this same Los Angeles. And you got the Bosch books, you got the Lincoln Lawyer books, you got Ballard, you got McAvoy. You got a lot of different books that are in the same universe. So I don't know if this is in the same universe, but it's not in LA. Whereas most of his books are in LA. Sometimes they take place partially in some other places, but for the most part, Los Angeles is almost like a character in the story. Well, this new one's set on Catalina Island off the coast of California, so that'll be interesting to me. I don't know if this is going to be a one-off or if this is the new a new installment series with a new protagonist. It doesn't matter to me. It's Connelly. I'm going to read it. I don't remember exactly much more about what it's about. I've learned as I get older, I don't like reading book blurbs more than once because so often they give you half of the book in the blurb and they kind of spoil things for you. So as soon as I notice that it's a book that I want to read, like a new Connelly, I read the blurb once and I've forgotten most of it, thankfully. But I look forward to reading that. That will be either May 20th, I might pick it straight up and read it right away, or maybe something I read a couple days later. But I'll definitely read this at the end of the month before I get to the works by Kay and King. The books that I'll read next, I'm going to read Written on the Dark before Stephen King's newest release. Written on the Dark by Guy Gavriel Kay is my most anticipated book released this year. I'm really excited to get to this. It's the first time that I've been a fan of this author or he's had a new release. So I'm excited to read this on day one. I considered applying for an ARC, but I actually didn't want to do that. I want to just wait and get it when it comes out. So I'm excited for that. It's set in his overall kind of connected world of Sarantine Mosaic and a lot of his other books. I don't know exactly where it'll take place in the timeline in comparison to the other books, but it's kind of in a part of the world he hasn't explored very much, which is Ferreris, which is the corollary to our France. And it's kind of Middle Ages, and it's Guy Gavriel Kay, and that's all I need to know. So I'm very, very excited to read Written on the Dark in May. After that, the next book that I will read will be Stephen King's Never Flinch. So this will probably be the first book that I read in June. Again, I read the book blurb. All I remember is that there are some recurring characters from some other books that will appear in here, including Holly Gibney. King's kind of obsessed with Holly right now, which is fine. I like Holly. But I think she's more of a minor character in this book rather than a main protagonist. But again, I don't like to be spoiled, especially with King. I think with King, the process of discovery is such an integral and exciting part of reading a Stephen King book that I don't want to be spoiled. So I read that blurb when it was announced last year. I don't remember much of it beyond that. But I do look forward to reading Never Flinch when it arrives May 27th. All right, on to the 5 probablys. The first probably is my next audiobook, and this is a strong probably. I've been reading about an audiobook a month, and my next one is called Small Favor by Jim Butcher. This is the latest book in the Dresden Files. I think it's the 10th book. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's the 10th book. The trajectory of this series continues to rise. It's not all linear. There are some bumps along the way, but overall, just this series gets better and better. And I do find that these work really well on audio because it is a first-person narrative. There's a very talented voice actor, James Marsters, that does the narration. And I think just this general, even though it's fantasy, kind of this crime noir type of style works really well on audio. So I do look forward to Small Favor. I don't read any of the blurbs for the Dresden book, so I don't know what it's about. Doesn't matter. It's the next step in the Dresden Files leading up to what everyone tells me changes is going to be a book of the year whenever I get to that. So we'll see if that happens in 2025. But Small Favor is the next probably on the list. Next probably after that is a work of Charles Dickens. You might see a little gap in my collection up here. The next one up for me is Martin Chuzzlewit. I read a work of Dickens every summer, and this is the one that's up next for me. I've never heard of this one. I don't know anything about this one, but again, I like kind of just discovering a book and kind of letting it come to me as the narrative will. So a lot of the lesser-known Dickens, frankly, haven't been as good as some of the more popular ones. Hopefully that's not the case with Martin Chuzzlewit. I'm still hoping to find that hidden gem in there, that Dickens that nobody's heard about that's as good as David Copperfield or Tale of Two Cities. But Martin Chuzzlewit is next for me, so I'll be reading this in June. And then after that, the next book that I'm going to read in this probably category, again, it's a strong probably, this is a reread, and it's a book that kicks off a trilogy, but I never read the rest of the trilogy. And the book is The Power of the Dog by Don Winslow. Don Winslow is the next author I want to explore in crime fiction. When I read all of those books, a lot of them rereads last year of Dennis Lehane, it just kind of renewed my interest in crime fiction. And when I read this, it was kind of one of those times in my reading where I was becoming a little less interested in crime fiction, becoming a lot more interested in fantasy. So fantasy had been kind of pushing crime fiction away for probably about 5 years now. Well, I feel like it's going the other direction because right now I'm not enamored by a lot of things that I see epic fantasy out there except for Continuing Malazan. Besides that, fantasy standalones seem to have more appeal to me right now. Maybe Guy Gavriel has spoiled me. But crime fiction is kind of on the rise for me, and I do want to read more Don Winslow. So I've read Power of the Dog, but I do want to read this and the rest of the Cartel trilogy, as it's called. The second book is The Cartel, and the third book is The Border. I haven't read those, but I have this penciled in June, so probably I'll read this one this quarter and then maybe the other two next quarter. But I do look forward to reading some Don Winslow this quarter. So the next two on the probably category is 2 advanced reading copies that were sent to me by authors. The first is Discovery by J.A.J. Minton, which is our friends over at Talking Story, John and Amy and Jacob. John sent this to me a few weeks ago, and I said I'll try to get to it before it releases. It does release in May, so I am going to try to release this. Read this in April to get a review out there ahead of time, but the advanced buzz on this book is really positive, and it seems like it's something I haven't read in a while. It's kind of like cosmic horror, sci-fi vibes. So I'm interested in that because I haven't read anything in that vein for, I don't know, it's been a couple years. So I'm definitely excited for that, but I've heard a lot of really, really great things for this. So thank you, John, for the arc, and I look forward to getting to this sometime this quarter, probably early. The other advanced reading copy that I received this quarter that I'm going to be reading is Augury of Blood by Michael R. Schultheis. I also was one of the people that helped release the cover reveal for this one. This looks really good to me. I've read 2 by Schultheis already. I read the first book of his Rostoval saga, which is kind of sword and sorcery in a Middle Eastern setting, which I enjoyed. And then I enjoyed his Arc of Ascension, which is a kind of a sci-fi thriller novella that I enjoyed that as well. Well, this is the first book in a series as well, and it's Bronze Era inspired, which sounds great, but the thing that really got me interested is that he says one of his influences in writing this trilogy that he's going to write is the operas of Richard Wagner, which is a huge fan of mine as an orchestra conductor. The times I've gotten to conduct Wagner have been just incredibly memorable to me. I've loved his music since I was first introduced to his music in music school. And I look forward to seeing just kind of the influences. I suspect that his story of The Ring of the Nibelung is going to be a primary influence for Augury of Blood, but I'll look forward to discovering that. But that book comes out, I think, in July, so I'll probably put this kind of later in the quarter so that I read it kind of right before the book is actually released. So I look forward to Augury of Blood sometime this quarter. All right, on to the maybes. The next maybe is one that I will be reading this quarter, but I'm not confident that I'll finish it, and that is Skeleton Crew by Stephen King. The reason I'm not confident I'll finish it is I use short stories as kind of palate cleansers between books. So I read a short story or two between each book. Well, there are 21 short stories and a novella in this collection. And I also have the Sun Eater short stories that I'll be reading this quarter. So this is one that I might finish it in June, but it might kind of linger into the third quarter. So maybe I'll talk about this in 3 months when I do that video too. But this is my next short story collection. It's been so long since I read this. I don't remember most of these. I do remember The Mist pretty clearly because it's a novella, but just reading the title names of the different short stories in this collection, I don't remember them, so I'm really excited to read these. I've been enjoying my Stephen King short fiction project, which I started last year, and this will be the next one on that. The next maybe is one that, man, just taking it off the shelf, like, I want to start reading it, like, right now. This is a reread for me. I've been wanting to reread Crime and Punishment for quite some time. And every time I see someone talk about it or someone put out a review on it, I just want to reread it again. So I have 3 different translations. This is probably the one that I'll reread. This is the Paviran Volohansky translation. I kind of read some of this just as a comparison with the Constance Garnett, which is the first time I read it, but I don't want to digress into that. But I do want to reread Crime and Punishment, so even though this is a maybe, it's a real strong maybe. Probably goes closer to a probably or even a definite that I do want to reread Crime and Punishment in the next quarter. Chances are I'll get to a second audiobook this quarter, and the next audiobook I have lined up is one, it's a nonfiction short read. It's called Traveling Abroad. No, it's called Living Abroad. And I'm 5 or 10 years from retirement, so, you know, everything's on the table, and living abroad is something that has appealed to me for a while. So just want to read a little bit about that, so that sounds interesting to me. And then these last 2 are definite maybes, but the first one I think is probably a stronger maybe than others, and that's Isabel by Guy Gavriel Kay. The reason this is a very strong maybe is after I read Written on the Dark and Fiona of Our Tapestry, I'll have read everything by Kay except for this. And I do want to read everything by Kay, even though this is the one everybody kind of says is the least of his works. But I also have a really fun video in my head of what I want to do as kind of a summation when I've finished reading everything by Kay, and I might want to get to that video, so I would have to read this first. So I strongly suspect that I'll read this quarter. This last one is a huge long shot because it's so big. This will only happen if I get really far ahead in June, because I'm off work at June, so I can read more. And this is one that now the hype has died down. I really want to dive into Wind and Truth. This is heavy. So I do want to get to that. It's kind of a long shot, though. I wouldn't bank on seeing a review from me from that unless I really get ahead this quarter. But we'll see, because I really do want to read it, especially having just read Yumi and really enjoying it, because this author's kind of, I said, his stock was plummeting for me, but had a little bit of an uptick. So maybe this will be another one. We'll see. It's the results, the reviews have been kind of mixed on this one, but now that the hype's died down, I want to just kind of go in fresh and just see what I think about it. But anyway, that is my second quarter, my reading plans. If you've read any of these books, let me know in the comment section below what you thought of them. Spoiler free, of course, because I haven't read them except for my couple rereads in there. And I would love to hear from you. What is the book that you are most looking forward to reading in the next 3 months? Let me know. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. You can also find me on Twitter, Goodreads, and the Fireside Discord. I'd love to interact with you there. As always, thank you for watching. Until next time, goodbye.